Okay, so we realize now as a parent that there's porn sites are kind of like Netflix and kind of like those things, and they kind of also know now that there's all kinds of, genres and types of pornography. And so hopefully the parent is going like, okay, I get that, and they realize too that their kid is like any human being, that they're sexual and that they're going to go in sexual ways at some point. This isn't a shocker. It shouldn't be a shocker.
It shouldn't be.
Shouldn't be a shocker to us as human beings that this is where we go, But understanding, I think, a secular worldview on sex is important for parents. Right. Why is that, a secular worldview?
The reason why is because when you go onto the internet, that's what you're experiencing. You're experiencing a secular worldview of sexuality. So basically, because a lot of people in the church are unwilling to talk about the biblical worldview of sex, that's the only worldview your child knows about. So meaning that basically we think we're communicating to our child about the biblical worldview of sex by simply stating, wait till marriage, it's beautiful in marriage, God wants you to have pleasure in marriage. We think that we're expressing the biblical worldview that way, but we're really not. We're really not getting into all the nuances of how sexuality really feels and is experienced by someone growing up in the culture today. So the fact that your child probably has gotten basically their only perspective and worldview of sex from the secular worldview, it's important for you to understand that. So you're not, when you're communicating to your child, it's not like two ships passing in the night, where you're talking to them and they're not really grabbing what you're saying, because they're coming at it from a completely different perspective.
Yeah, and when we say worldview, we mean how you look at the world. And most the philosophies of outside the church, most of it carries what we call a humanistic worldview. And that's really rooted in things like evolution of mankind, right. Things like that. So ape to man evolution. And this is important for a parent to understand, because from a secular worldview, nothing's wrong with porn.
Right.
So when your kid's living in a world that is not adhering to a biblical worldview, of course they're going to adhere to another worldview.
Right.
And that worldview is one of not the biblical worldview.
Right.
So it's going to be natural for your kid to pick up on some of that philosophy of the world.
Right.
And you can't just say, hey, don't trust, don't ever, think about it, or don't ever get sucked into it. It's going to happen.
Right. It's absolutely going to happen. And the more that you defame the secular worldview, meaning the more that you talk down about it and say like, that's stupid, that's not what God intended, that's not pleasurable, the more it's actually going to have the adverse effect on your child. Meaning the more that people told me like pornography is horrible, it's terrible, you never want to watch it, the more it actually had an adverse effect on me, because when I watched it, I didn't see something horrible. Like I was kind of expecting the first time I got exposed to porn to see something like really terrible that was going to impact me and make me feel like bad or yucky or something like that. And that wasn't my experience. Like when I watched it, I really, really enjoyed it, which made me actually antagonistic to the biblical worldview, where I thought it was shallow, I thought it was illogical, I thought it was unattainable, and so it actually pushed me away from it because I didn't understand it. And another important thing to understand is that when we say the secular worldview on sex and the biblical worldview on sex, it's really hard to distinguish between the two of them, because here's the thing: if you were to watch, not you should, right? But if you were to watch a couple who loved God and was experiencing their sexuality in marriage in a way that did honor God and glorify Him, there wouldn't be much in their sex life to distinguish them from a secular couple. Mm-hmm. Meaning that sex is sex in both contexts. The difference is not what they're doing, the actions that they're performing, it's their hearts that they have behind it.
That's right.
And so again, if you just talk down and you say like, man, the secular worldview is dumb, pornography is stupid, you also have to understand is that a lot of pornography is simply depicting sexual acts.
Yeah, and that's what we really want to stress